I've already done 2 of the sewing pieces. I repaired a dinosaur and a pillow of my dogs. They're my dog's dinosaur and my dog's pillow. So that's alright. But what we have left is a snake with a squeaker loose and a frog with many holes. All hand sewing, nothing automatic. Frog is where we're going to start today, because it has the needle in its tummy. So, prior to this, I already have a small amount of thread on this needle, just a little bit. So yeah, that's okay. Should probably have far better posture than that. I'm fine with relaxing. I actually need to like sit into the chair and stuff like that. That should be a lot better. So, first off, we're choosing what to. Dead squeaker in that foot. This is a previously sewn up foot. Squeaker in it. Hole up near the eye. Hole in the tummy. Up this leg. Everything else seems alright. So we've got. Oh, no, we've also got a neck. So we've got 4 things to repair: leg, tummy, eye, neck. So we'll start. Leg seems easiest. It's a small hole so far. So we have a knot in the end of this thread, as you normally do. And we're going to send the knot into the inside of the piece. Move the camera, the microphone up here. Maybe. Okay, hopefully that might be loud enough. I could also turn it up. I think that might do. To see. Doesn't look like I'm hitting the right volume bars. You can also think, maybe. I might just have to move it closer. It's okay. Okay. I move here, and the microphone is there, then it's basically as good as it's going to get, because if you want to see this, then you need to be looking there. So we have the knot on the inside of the leg, and we came out the top. If I get closer up. Close enough, but it's a little bit better. Feels weird to hold it there though, so I'm fine with this. Be able to see it myself. Okay, so we came up, and we're going to go back down, straight where we came up. Now that we're down on the inside of the fabric, we want to pull the leg, so we want to go through the leg, so we want to come up out of the hole, up in through the leg, And since we're coming up through the leg, we want to pull the leg back down. So we want to go back down under the leg, or under the hole onto the other side. It'll help pull the leg in to the hole. Runs through one side. We're going to move over a little bit, come back through the bottom of the stitch. We're going to go up into the leg. Down underneath our stitch and come out the top. That's going to pull our leg down. So what we're doing is we're going, if you think of this is the leg here, we're going down into the stitch. We're going up the surface of the leg and into the leg, and then down and then underneath the stitch. And what that does is when we have the leg that's up here and we're stitching up here and our holes are down here, we're pulling the stitch down into our frog. Because our goal is to bring the leg back down into the frog and repair it, because the leg is starting to get pulled out. But hey Kingjoy, how's it going? Welcome to today's stream of repairing a frog. Oh, and a snake. Maybe more if... I've also got a rhino. I could do the rhino too. Yeah, my dog is... I like to make sure his stuff is repaired. He doesn't really tear them apart. He just puts little holes in them. So... he likes to chew, so I like to let him chew. Similar to the last couple of stitches that I was explaining, these are coming out exactly the same. There is no difference in the method that we're doing. Currently. It won't take long until we're done with the leg, and now we could just do a ladder stitch. It's okay, Kingjoy, I don't need donations. So a ladder stitch is, the way it works is I can actually draw a picture of a ladder stitch. This one is a little bit more complex, but ladder stitches are potentially the most useful stitches because they're ones that people use for like clothing and stuff like that, or some people call it the invisible stitch. I might actually need a thicker pen, make it more easy to see. I only really carry fine pens. Okay, this one will do the best. Okay, so the way a ladder stitch works is you basically, if a ladder goes like this, you have the rungs, that's a ladder. The way a ladder stitch works is you make, the reason it's called that is because if you think of this side of the ladder as a piece of clothing and the other side of the ladder as the piece of clothing, these rungs is actually the stitches. So what you do is you start at the top of the ladder and you build a rung, and then you go down, and then you build a rung, and you go down, and you build a rung. And you repeat this pattern all the way to the end of your stitch. And what happens is when you pull the thread from both sides, all of these rungs will push inwards, and then you'll end up with almost a straight line, which is just your stitch. But what it's actually doing is it's pulled the stitch, not the stitch, but the material on either sides of those rungs together, and that's why it's called an invisible stitch. Because unlike some of the other stitches where you see the exterior of them looping, A ladder stitch is not normally very strong, but it's quite stealthy. Also very quick. So what we're going to be doing, since we don't want our dog to chew through this, but we don't want to look at the stitch, we're going to do an invisible stitch, but with strong twine. We have a very thick thread here. So we're going to be doing a ladder stitch. So, to do that more effectively, you could see, I've been trying to push this tail in. It's the tail from the thread that we had at the start. It's just, I put a long tail on it accidentally. But you could see this is us here. This is our out. And this along here is our hole. Okay, what we do. So we're coming out, we come into the side, keep in mind the side thread. And then back out side of the thread, and that is us making one rung. We do not pull this yet, so we go back into the side of the next thread, but keep in mind that we are staying similar to our picture. We're staying, see how our threads are horizontally zigzagging. So the way we make progress down the stitch or down the hole is down the sides of the thread. So when we're making a rung, we're making sure that we're staying horizontal to our last bit where we came out. Normally when you stitch, the way you make, like when you go up and down and up and down, you're making the curve, and when you come up, the way you make progress across the hole is by going up and then coming back down further ahead. But you don't do that in this stitch. You stay in the material and then you make a rung, and then you stay in the material and then you make another rung, and then you stay in the material. So the way you progress in the stitch is in the material. So when you make your rungs, you want the hole where your needle is coming out to match where the hole horizontally into the fabric where the needle is going in. And that will mean when you pull the thread, the out hole is right next to the in hole, and that will allow them to line up and make the stitch almost invisible. Now, it feels like I'm getting to a bit of resistance in this, which means that the frog is stitched with a plastic thread. So it feels like that I'm hitting into those threads. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to force my way through those threads with a thimble. A thimble is for allowing you to push a needle through a harder material. Two key things to keep in mind: you are pushing through material. When you push through something harder, you can break your needle. And when you're pushing through something harder, it also means it's going to be harder to pull it through, which means that there'll be more tension on your thread. But do keep that in mind. If there's too much tension on your thread, then your thread will snap. Now that we're coming to the end of this stitch now, because we have done the leg and we have now closed, because this is only a small hole. This is the easy one. This is the small one that's stuck. Now that we're coming to the end of it, we're looking to tie it off. So what we want to do is come into the opposing wall of our ladder stitch, go through with the needle, but do not pull all of the thread through. we're going to do is grab our thread. We're going to loosen that thread. We're going to make a hole. It's hard for you to see, but we're making the hole, and we're going to send the needle through the hole, and it's going to make a knot on the surface. We're not, I'm not too worried about doing a knot on the underside. You can make your invisible thread, and then when you make that knot, if you do it on the inside of it, you won't see the knot on the surface, but I'm not that worried. The piece that I'm doing is not necessary. So now that we did it on one side, we did the knot, so we're going to go back into the other side, and we're going to pull the needle through. And we have our hole again. Send the needle through the hole, and come down for a second knot. Cool. So theoretically, that should be tied off. If we want to tighten our threads, such as bunch them together, we can knot it off in different ways. But for now, we're just doing a simple knot off. So we cut off the thread. Now, to make sure that our thread doesn't unwind, we leave a little bit of thread on our knot that we made, but that knot is with the two threads next to each other because of how a needle works. So what you do is you leave the tails spare and you just do a normal knot, one that you'll do into your shoelace. Not with the bows, just the first part, and you do a double knot. You could do more if you want, it'll make it more secure. I've done 2 with the thread, with the needle, and then I've done 2 with the tails. So now I'm going to snip it off. Give yourself a little bit of space, just in case, because as this knot gets tugged on, especially for a dog or a piece of clothing like some pants or some denim jeans, if there is no elasticity, it's going to pull on your thread. And when it's pulling on your thread, you want your thread to have a little bit of space on the other side of your knot, so that if it starts pulling those tails through the knot, it has space to do that. Whereas if you cut your tails all the way right at the surface of the knot, then it can actually pull them through. You can pull the tails through the knot, and that will loosen your knot and take them under your knot. So we have about this much space on our thread now, which I think is enough to repair the eye. Normally I would not do much more, because this is not much thread, and it's not much money for you to, you know, just to snip off or to undo this thread and chuck this thread in the bin and re-snip a new nice long piece. But I'm going to work with what I've got. So we showed last time, I think, on our stream, on some sewing, how to tie off the end. But what you do is you grab right at the end and you wrap it around your finger nice and tight, and you pinch it and you thread it through the hole. And what you do is you make a knot, and you do the exact same process, but what you do is you try and make a knot onto your other knot, and that will actually make the knot, like the physical ball of the knot, bigger. And that means that that ball, when you're going through the material, is not going to get pulled through, or shouldn't. And if it is getting pulled through, you need to make the ball bigger, because then the bigger the ball, the harder it is to pull through. So we're doing an eye. So we can actually see the hole in this one. This isn't just like a seam tear, this is like an actual hole. And what we're going to do is we're going to do this in 2 stages. We're going to push all of the stuffing back into, so you get your finger and you hold open the stitch and you push your finger into the hole and you push all the stuffing in. So now we're just dealing with material, like all of this is material here. We're not worrying about the stuffing anymore. This is just material. There's no stuffing in our way. So now we have a look. So the way the frog eye is done is there's a stitch that goes across the middle of his head and then down the back and around the back of his eye. See how this stitch across the top of his head and then down around his eye are not parallel? Means you should not be doing a straight stitch. Means that you should be doing a straight stitch and then a straight stitch but on a different angle, or a curved stitch. So all of them will be fine. You just have to change up how you do things. So we're going to start all the way as far as we can see into the stitch where it starts to loosen up from the normal frog head, which is, you know, we're on, this is our dead eye here, so we're a little bit over halfway, which is fine. So we're going to do the same thing. We thread it into the bottom of the stitch so that our tail is on the inside of the animal. It's fine if it's on the outside, it just means you have to trim it. So if you do it this way, then the tail's on the inside, you don't have to trim it. And we're going to do a letter stitch again. It's a good way to hide the stitch, and currently we don't need to actually be repairing too much. We don't need to be pulling the seams together because we started all the way at the start, so we're just reinforcing the seams here. And once we've reached the part where we're ready to start making a stitch rather than just reinforcing them from the previous ones that are there, because these ones are just loosened. Once we're there, which is where we are, we're going to start doing our ladders. This one isn't a ladder stitch. I don't know what this one is called by name, but the shape that the stitch makes is a V. So, stick the needle into the frog's face. It'll be fine. Let's go to this. If we have our sides of the material again, what I am doing is I'm going from here on the top side to the bottom side of the material and coming out here. And when I come out here, I'm going to the top side to the bottom side of the material, and I'm coming out here. This is very similar to the ladder stitch, but instead of going down the material, I'm going down to the next material on a diagonal. So instead of going down this way, I'm going down this way, and then I'm going down this way, and I'm going down this way. So you can sort of see the reason I'm doing this one is just very quick. It's also quite strong because, well, the strength of this knot is based on your thread, which is why I'm using a strong thread. Because when you pull all of these, it is going to pull the material too, but it's going to pull them down on like little angles like this, and you'll see a little V shape all the way down your material. So like, if you've watched like horror movies, I don't know, or even kids movies, you'll see like toys that are repaired with like a stitch that looks like this. And it's because it's a very easy stitch, and it's good at repairing toys because it's fast and it takes little time. So you can just use something like a strong thread, and since the strength of that stitch is based on your thread, as long as your material doesn't break before your thread does, then you can repair it very quickly. So we're going from the top of one of our sides to the bottom and then back out the top. We're emerging from the top. So we're now at the top of our other side, and we're going to go down into the piece and out the top of our next side. It's fine if you tug this one, because unlike a ladder stitch where you really need to make sure that the holes for your horizontal rungs line up, this one does not have horizontal rungs. This is angled, so it's fine, because when you tug it, all of the thread is bunching up, and your horizontal rungs will all close, and it will pull the seam shut. But since the seam on this one is where we're reaching into the future, like we're reaching into the next section of the material, we don't actually have to worry about the seams being closed behind us, because ahead of us is where we're putting the needle. Whereas in a ladder stitch, you're not putting the needle ahead, you're putting the needle horizontal. That matters. Okay, so Sorry, I have a sniffle, guys. I don't know. I've had a bit of a runny nose all morning. It's fine if you do this sort of stuff. The amount of damage that a pin does to like material is none, or it's relatively none. So, but stabbing whatever project you're doing in the face, while you go and put it down. It's more important to know where the needle is when you come back to it, than to worry about how many micro pin-sized holes are in Mr. Frog's face now, rather than way more important for me to know that his pin is right here, sticking out of his head. So, when you're done with that, you can tighten the stitch, tighten it all the way down, because now we're working on the eye. So, what we want to do is all of the material that's meant to be on the inside of the stitch, we want to push it onto the inside of the stitch. Start on the outside, very similar to the leg. We're starting the top. Actually, no, we're gonna start in the top. We're gonna push down into the seam. So we're gonna come out the bottom, and then we're gonna reach up to our eye. We're gonna get our eye up nice and high, and then we're gonna pull the eye back down into. So since we have a high stitch, we're going to be pulling this down into our frog's head again. Hey, Sheeta. So yeah, same as with the leg. When we have a stitch that's coming across, we're going up into the eye hole and then across, and we're going down into it and then back into the head. What happens when you have that U shape? Since you're going up, and when you pull the threads out, that U shape comes down to a straight line, and that will pull the eye back down into the frog's head, which means that you don't have like material boggling out of your stitch anymore, because previously his eye was like floating and hanging out. So you want to pull that back down, pull all the material back into the hole where it came from. Going well. Repairing some of Bertie's toys. So what I'm doing here is there's frayed sections of the frog's head, like the material that's coming out of his eye, and where it's been torn with a tooth, it's quite frayed. So I'm using the back end of the needle because it's more blunt than the front end of the needle, and I'm pushing that material into the stitch, back into the frog's head on the inside, so that it neatens it up on the outside so that I can work on it. If you can't really see what you're stitching, it makes it a lot harder. Watch yourself to stab yourself. Solid rule when sewing. Yeah, Bertie really likes his toys, and I wouldn't want to take him out and replace them with others, so I just repair his old ones. Okay, so we still have a part of this frog's eye that is solidly hanging out of the stitch, so we're going to poke that back down into the stitch, and where it came from, it's going to leave a hole. So we're going to seal that hole off. We're about done there, so now we can start working now that we're done attaching the eye from like here down into the stitch, we can work, we've worked across the top of the head, now we're going to work down the back of the eye and make sure that that's all sealed off. Doing some nice simple V-shaped stitches that I was doing before, and where you, since this area should not be too dense with stitches, it's alright to use a thimble here and there. You shouldn't end up with too much friction just from here. You normally want to look out for like, you're worried about your thread snapping. Based on the materials thread already, such as like in this toy, it has a plastic thread. The places where the plastic thread will be the strongest is joints. So where you see a seam cross over like another seam, so like at the neck here, there's a seam going down and a seam going across. Right in the middle here, the big wad of the plastic thread that I would want to avoid if I was repairing down that near that area, because the plastic thread is much stronger than mine, and when it's causing friction against each other, my thread is the one that's going to lose out. So now that we're done, sending it through just like we did last time, through the material and making the hole and tying a knot through the thread. So now our thread is knotted. Trim it, leaving space for tails, and then we tie a knot in the tails. Just 2 knots, it's fine. You can't do more, you can just do 1. So what we did last time is we chopped the tails off, but what I'm going to show you this time is a different way of dealing with tails. So when you trim these tails, you actually want to make sure that it's nice and sharp on the edges, because what we're going to do is similar to how last time I was explaining with the tails. When the knot, or when the stitch that you just made gets tugged on, whether it be by a dog or because you're wearing a new pair of pants or something like that, you can that knot will get tugged on. So what we're going to do is, instead of trimming the tail short this time, so we're going to send the needle into the material. It's coming inside of his head and outside one side, but you do not pull this all the way through. Since it's partway through, you can thread 1 or 2 of the tails into the needle's eye now. And what this is going to do is it's going to hide the tails on the inside of the material. Okay, and now he has some thread poking out his front eye, but what I could do is I can trim this one really close to his face. You're doing much cooking? No. I'll actually still cook a lot, yes, but I haven't thought of streaming it yet, no. But now I've pulled that one tight, cut it tight to his face, and now that I've cut it tight to his face, I can just pull the material up around his face, and that will pull the threads back into the inside so that you can't see them anymore. And now our frog's eye are back on. So since we pushed all the stuffing out of this eye, so that we can do the thread, we're gonna try and wiggle some stuffing back up there so that he can chew on the eyeball again with some squish to it. Other than just the firmness of this cottony polyester, very polyestery material. Okay. So 2 lots of thread done. Now we're actually going to be attaching thread to this needle for the first time. We still have 2 more holes on this frog to go. We have the belly and the neck. Is that right? We had leg, belly, neck, eyeball. Yeah, so we just have 2 left. So belly and neck. We check the end of our thread, we make sure that it's not frayed. We can wet it if need be. Sometimes you might have to retrim the end of your thread, just resharpen all of those fibers. And it through the eye of your needle. Okay. We don't need too much this time, but I'm fine with having excess, so that there's some thread on my needle next time I come to use this green thread. So we're going to go for one of my full arm lengths, which would be about a meter 20 centimeters. You just toss, you don't, when you have all of the thread in your arms like this, and you need distance away from your needle, and you don't really want to twirl up your twine, you can just toss the needle like away from you. And the weight of the needle will pull the thread. You don't have to worry about not knowing where the needle is, because you already know where it is. It's on the end of your line. So, send a new knot into the end of the thread. Put a knot onto. Send a knot onto that knot. If you miss, just keep making a knot. I'm actually going for a big knot this time, because the material looks quite damaged where I'm about to start sewing. So I need a big knot, because if the material's damaged around the area, then it will make it more easy for the knot ball to get pulled through the material. You don't want that to happen. But the softer the material, the more that stitch gets pulled on, the more likely that knot is just going to get pulled through your stitch. Not through your stitch, through that material, and then the thread will just completely come out. But same as last time. We're starting our stitch on the inside of our frog. So our tail is now on the inside of our frog's tummy, and he is attached. We have a green thread on a white tummy, it's fine. Our dog will not hate us for this. And since this material is quite damaged, instead of a ladder, you can't really do a ladder stitch on braid material, because when you're climbing up the ladder of the stitch, I'll pull up the picture again. When you're coming up the ladder of the stitch, you're going upwards through the material. If your material is weak, then going up through it is not going to do much for you. Because the ladder stitch is a combination of your thread strength and the material strength. Whereas the V-shaped stitch that we were doing before is pulling material into the stitch. The ladder stitch is more invisible because you're pulling the thread and it's tightening the stitch. Whereas what's happening here is we're pulling the thread, but we're pulling material into the hole, because we have bad material on the inside where our scar or our tear is, and we have good material on the outside. So we're sewing into that good material, and we're pulling that good material near the good material over here into a stitch. Whereas if you are going upwards and into the material and across, then you're coming into your frayed material on the inside where the tear is. If you sew into the frayed or teared material that is weak, then since it is weak, you won't get a strong stitch. One disadvantage of having like a large amount of thread on your needle is how far you have to like pull the thread through material. Because if you have like 1.5 meters of thread, then you have to pull the needle 1.5 meters of thread's worth through every single loop. Because you don't want to cause knots in your thread by not pulling it through all the way. You You don't have to tighten, but you still have to pull it through. But depending on your stitch, you need to make sure. Sometimes you don't have too little. Because sometimes you need to do a certain zag or a certain loop or something like that with the amount of spare thread. Okie dokie, catch you next time. Thanks for stopping by. But yeah, so when you have the amount of spare thread is needed sometimes. Not normally, it's very rare. Make sure you have enough. As well as you need to make sure you have enough to tie off knots at the end and everything else. It's quite difficult to knot a thread which you have no extra for. You can't knot what you don't have. We have got the troublemaker himself on the stream now, trying to take his frog that is not fully repaired. So, you have to wait until your frog is fully done. Yeah, your frog is not done yet. Neither is the snake. Wait a little bit. Hurting the frog, I'm fixing the frog. May look like I'm putting a needle in and out of his tummy, but it's for a good thing. Because then his tummy won't be open anymore. Okay, so we're all the way at the end of our frog stitch, so we're going to make one knot. And we're going to go back through the material. And we're going to make the other knot. 2 knots done. Make sure we don't lose the needle. Okay, send our needle back into the frog for now, so that we know where it is. We've got our tails on the stitch. Make sure that the tails are knotted together. Cool. We're actually going to send these tails into the material as well. nice sharp scissors. Clean cuts on the thread. Grab our needle. I can't actually pull them through this time though, because I've already knotted the end of this needle. So, we're just going to cut it short. Awesome. Don't have Mr. Frog yet. Still has one more thing to get repaired. Then you can start shooting on Mr. Frog. Hmm? Got under your chin there, buddy. Okie dokie. So, we still have one more hole on the neck area. We can't have Mr. Frog yet. So we'll start on the neck area. You can have this leg. Have this leg. And I'll start working on the neck. Okay. Start our tail off on the inside of the stitch. And same as we have done before. Same stitch, because it's the same project, the same methods, with the same goals. I know you want to frog, but it's okay. You'll be fine, just for a bit. You can sit on the bed if you want. Don't go anywhere near the needles. Here you go. Go sit on the bed. Yeah. Yes. Up. Up. You don't want to go up? You really want the frog, don't you? It's fine. You just have to wait. Okie dokie. You have to wait, big man. You have to wait. Don't make me kick you out for being a bad customer. Okay, we're all done with the stitch. We push it through. Ooh, feels like too much friction. I am at one of the joint sections that I said that I should avoid. That's fine. I did tell you this again, you just okay. Do them not once. Ow. That stitch was way too deep in and very visible. A very visible stitch. Very visible. Not at the end there, but it's okay. It's a dog toy. But formal dress or something. Same as before. We're making sure. Grab our tails. Put a knot in them. And we grab our tails. We put a knot in them. This neck joint is thoroughly knotted. You can actually see how much of a knot that I've got here, because you can actually see the dark splodge of where the knot is on the screen. Okay. Now we check. Always do this. Repair a kid's toy, repair shirt, pants. You have the needle out, you have the thread out. Look over it. Is there anything else that could be done here now while you have it all out ready? Did everything seal properly? Is everything nice and tight? Does it need to look neat? If it does need to look neat, does it look neat? Stuff like that. Here you go. Still almost a rubber tree as well. Yeah? Look at Johnny as well. Reach him now? I don't know if you can reach him. Mr. Brock needs your help. He needs your help. Grab him, quick. Prepare Mr. Snake. Right. Mr. Snake has a dissected squeaker. Here. So each segment of this snake is sewn into separate sections with these cylinders in them. And each cylinder is a squeaker. What's happened is he's had this snake for a very long time. It's usually the first time I have to repair the snake. Means he's chewed open one of the sections and pulled the squeaker out, but lucky for him, the squeaker still works. So I can put the squeaker back in and he can continue to enjoy squeaking this segment. So this one's pretty simple. What has happened is the stitch holding the snake together has come undone, which is a straight stitch, which means that we can do a looping stitch, which if I draw that one, it's very quick as well, and it's very easy, and you can do it for a straight stitch. So a loop stitch is, this is your material. What you do is you hold your material together and then you loop around it. You come into a loop, you go over and over and over and over and over and over. You stitch over the material. Strength on this one, pretty mediocre. So this is a non-talking section because it's not like it's an arm or a leg or something like that that gets pulled on. So the strength of the stitch does not need to be there. This is mainly to just close it up. So yeah, you don't need the strength. You don't need to design strength into a stitch when there's no need for it. So yeah, that's what we're doing on this one. Okay. Same as before. We're gonna clean up the area where we're about to start stitching. So this one has lots and lots of frayed bits because of the bottom of it was torn. So all of the frayed bits, we're just going to take some material scissors too. This is very rough. I'm going to pull out the old threads, all of the old stuff that's loose and just in the way. Visual clutter. Visual clutter. And once that is all out of the way, we can look at how we're going to start threading this together better. Dang. I put the needle somewhere that I wasn't able to keep an eye on it, so I'll keep it on the desk. To lightly tug at this area and pull off bits of thread. So done with that, all the little bits that are attached, and trim. You don't want the dog consuming any of these or stuff like that. Any other ones that you're trimming that you see are the previous thread of the stitch, tie them off. Because if you just cut them, those threads are just gonna get looser down the seam. Tie them off. That means that they're not gonna come loose anymore. At least from where they are. It's a good thing for
Ryan Little.
When I was younger, I was very partially shown how to sew. The way you learn things, and the way you should learn things from experience, and not exactly all self-knowledge, but if you want to get better at something, you need to at least partially be interested by it. So interest yourself in sewing and learn how to sew to repair your materials, not just your dog toys, but your clothes and your pillowcases and your bed sheets. They're all repaired differently. They use different needles, they use different threads. Once you get past repairing, you're just making fixes to seams and stitches. Have a look at making. Make seams, make stitches, make clothing. So we're coming to an area where we need to start putting the old frayed material into the stitch. So we're going to do the zigzag stitch that we were doing before. Because we need to push the material, the bad material, into the inside of the toy. That's what we're going to do. Okay, so since I've been doing the ladder stitch for a while here, when I tug this, it tightens down well, and it tightens down good. So I'm actually going to create a checkpoint for myself, and make a knot so that, while all of that is tight behind me, I can work into the future with a checkpoint. So if something goes bad, I only lose progress down to there. The same as any checkpoint works in all games. Okay, so now that we're coming to the end of our stitch, and all of our material that was stuffed in to the end of it, the good parts at the end of the stitch are starting to want to come out, so that's fine. Now that we're done pushing the material in, we can revert to, we're going to make a checkpoint again, because now we're done at that section. We're going to, lock it off, seal it, tuck it away. We fixed it, and now we revert back to one of our other stitches, because when we're done doing one thing, we can continue on the stitch that next best fits the solution, and we're done. So same as always, send a thing through, send one knot into the thread, send another one into the other side, send a knot into the thread, tie off, trim, done. Okay, so what we have done is we have sealed away our dog's squeaker, which is good. He really wants the squeaker. He loves squeaky toys. Okay, so what we do, we have the snake and the thread and the needle. We look down the project, we look up the project. Does anything else look like it needs repaired right here, right now, while we've got the materials? This is a little hole here. You can see this being a problem in the future. I don't think it's that bad of a problem right now, but I have the needle and thread here and now, so why not do it? This one's gonna be the quickest one yet. There's not gonna be much explaining. You guys know how it works. Send the tail in into the stitch, choose what stitch you need for the situation. Do you need to pull damaged material into a thread? Do you just need to reinforce a old stitch that's already there? Do you need to is this a talking, like, is there going to be pressure on this stitch? Does the stitch need to be strong, or does the material need to be strong? Does the thread need to be strong? How are you going to do your stitch? I've explained the different stitches, and I've used them in the different situations. So that is why you don't need my help anymore. You don't need my help because you have my knowledge. You know how to repair. You might not have repaired yet, so you don't have the experience to repair. But you have the intelligence to repair, and you turn that intelligence into experience. And when you apply that experience, then you create wisdom. Wisdom isn't just smart people. Intelligence is the data. Experience is the usage. Wisdom is how good you actually are at using it. All done. We only have a little bit of thread left, but that's fine. So we have our old thread wheel. Always make sure that the old thread coming off the wheel is not loose. You don't want that to get snagged on something and unravel. Grab your green threaded needle. Send just lightly your green threaded needle through a couple of threads there and send it up into the stitch. Your loose tail that's coming off the needle, send it around your thread. That is how you don't have to store it like that, but that's how I store it. Okay, returning back to our toy. Grab the tails. Tie the tails off. Two's just fine. You can do more if you want. I wouldn't suggest doing less, but you can also do less. Cut off the tails. We've already inspected it, so we know that it's all done. Now, you can keep wearing that piece of clothing, or your dog keep chewing on the dog toy. All the way into the future, until you need to repair it next time. So yeah, that's how you do that. Now, over time, you collect a couple different colors of thread and situations and stuff like that. And I told you on the last time that I was doing some sewing, recommended threads that I have to cover all of the situations that I need. Okay. Packing up after sewing. Very, very, very important. Every needle that you used, make sure that you put it away. Every needle that you got out, make sure that you know where it is and that you have put it away. And all of the thread ends, stuff like that, from pulling them out of the toys, or anything like that you have related to sewing, when you are done with it, even all the tiny little balls of lint, collect them, put them somewhere that you can transport it easily over to a bin, and put them in the bin. Sometimes little bits of material like this green, there's enough material here to be useful one day, but the odds of that are low. And my storage space for storing weird tail ends of material is not there. So we're tossing it out. A moment.